Claire thoroughly rinsed the rag so that there were no dirty streaks left on it. Oliver Jonathan lost again at the races today. He will obviously not be in the best mood. And when he's in a bad mood, he finds fault with every little thing. What a misfortune a man must have. Sometimes he gambles at the races, sometimes he carouses with girls, as if he has set out to waste his life. It would seem that if I live, I don't want to. My father inherited a chain of pharmacies, and the business is profitable because everyone has health problems. No, if a person is not born with enough problems, he must create them himself. Claire thanked fate every day for such happiness. She had no one to leave her inheritance to. My mother died when she was 6 years old from viral pneumonia caused by the severe flu, and my stepfather didn't care about anything but the white bottle. Claire still remembers how aunts from custody who came to their orphaned home tried to talk to him. My stepfather didn't even seem to understand what they were asking him. He listened, waved his hand, and went to his room to get drunk. In this situation, Claire very quickly found herself in a boarding school. It wasn't so bad compared to her drunk and aggressive stepfather in an empty apartment, and Claire slowly got used to it. The frozen fear in her eyes gave way to sad thoughtfulness, and now, after finishing school, an intelligent, sociable, and serious girl fluttered out of the government walls. At first, she was incredibly lucky. She had at her disposal, it was a small house on the outskirts of the city, which was given to her by the Fund for Helping Orphaned Children. Oh, what a blessing it was to have a home of my own. Not a corner, not a room in a noisy dorm, but your own home. Despite its desolation and unsightly appearance, Claire thought it looked like a palace. She washed it clean, pulled up the ubiquitous weeds in the yard, and hung up the old-fashioned but still elegant lace curtains that a neighbor had given her for a housewarming party. It was especially pleasant in the evenings when at dusk you could brew tea with mint growing right behind the house and sit on the veranda watching the noise of the day subside and the whole area sink into the night slumber. But dreams are dreams, and it was necessary to earn a daily bread, so Claire got a job as a salesman in a small shop nearby. It is not far from home, and there is not a large crowd of people there. Claire had a difficult relationship with the crowd. On the one hand, growing up in a boarding school, she was used to always being in public, and on the other, when there were so many people, it was impossible to remember even their faces, and she felt an unaccountable fear as if she was about to get lost in the crowd like a grain of sand, and he won't even find his way home. Overall, the little shop was a great place from all angles, and would have remained so for a long time if not for the significant shortage after 4 months of operation. Claire cried for days on end, but she couldn't prove anything. The "nothing like this happened before you came" argument was impenetrable. Childhood in a boarding school only added fuel to the fire. Claire guessed that the shortage was the work of her shift worker, the ubiquitous, efficient Katie, but she could not prove anything. Out of naive credulity, she was afraid to be late for the arrival of the plumber, and did not count the cash register when she left. And then what? What then? Who first flew to the owner? He is right. Account? The owner shook his fists in a rage, threatened the police and the court, but in the end he cooled down and took a receipt in repayment of the debt. But how to pay it off? If you have a school certificate, but no work experience in a well-paid job, no one counts, and casual earnings are small. Only 1/10 was paid in 6 months. And then? Claire felt sick at the very memory of the first phone call, when a hoarse, insolent voice on the phone said, "Well, baby, are you going to pay Robert a debt, or are you going to get in trouble?" Robert was the name given to its former owner for his strong build and swinging bearish gait. She broke out in a cold sweat, realizing that the owner has connected local punks to this problem. Claire was desperately afraid of punks, because even in boarding school, The ubiquitous boys told her that even a police company fueled by alcohol or some kinds of dope-punks are considered more dangerous than experienced criminals because they are unpredictable and unaware of the degree of criminal responsibility for their misdeeds. Whether this was true or not, she didn't know for sure. But she was afraid to leave the house again and never kept the door unlocked. From time to time, the phone received threatening messages, a couple of times a note with words. "Thank you." "What is it?" came a voice from the crack in the door. They were written in red ink to be intimidating. How long this would have lasted is unknown, but the situation unfolded in a completely unexpected way. On one of the dark, impenetrable nights, a serious thunderstorm broke out, and as if deciding to deprive Claire of the last thing she has, lightning struck the roof of an old, dilapidated house. The landlady hadn't turned off the lights yet, and a short circuit in the wiring wasn't long in coming. The old wooden walls instantly caught fire, and the firefighters who responded to the call left only a charred, smoking carcass and a crying girl nearby. So to the random task walk, the corner walk was added. The whole story had only one advantage: a new phone number of the local collector of the coup and Robert himself. Now at least there will be some time to save up money to pay off the debt. In her fear, she went to the other side of the city, and after a long search, finally found a small extension in the house of a dry, active old woman with young, bright eyes. With Prudence Ivankova, they quickly found a common language, and Claire sometimes thought that she had finally found the grandmother she had missed so much as a child. In her heart of hearts, she hoped that the job issue would also be resolved in the same miraculous way, but miracles only happen if you don't expect them at all. Office after office. Failures everywhere. On one of those useless days, she wandered into the drugstore exhausted, longing for a glass of water rather than a job. But suddenly it wasn't the caterer who peeked out from behind the counter. It was a red-haired man with a receding hairline all over his head and asked, "Don't we have a job?" "There is always a job for such a beautiful girl. Our cleaning lady just quit. You can go there first. Then we'll find something more decent." The head belonged to Oliver Jonathan, the owner of a pharmacy chain, as it turned out later, a great lover of women and a variety of life's joys. But all this was discovered later, and at that time, Claire was incredibly happy with the friendly owner, sparkling shop windows, and the prospect of stable work. The next day, she met two pharmacists, Nancy and Natalie, cute, advanced, but arrogant girls. The friendship did not develop immediately. Both considered themselves superior to Claire. Looking haughtily at her simple appearance, and although they constantly quarreled among themselves, they were united in their attitude towards the newcomer. The phrase, "This is not our circle," was almost all written on their foreheads. Claire humbled herself. Compared to the thief Katie, the debt to Robert, and the burned-down house, these were the little things of life. In addition, Oliver Jonathan promised to come up with something more interesting. Without really thinking about what exactly it might be, Claire diligently cleaned out all the nooks and crannies every day and waited for changes. Oliver Jonathan periodically looked into the pharmacy, winked at Nancy and Natalie, brought Claire some small gift, a bar of chocolate or a bouquet, gently took her hand, looked into her eyes, then checked the availability and consumption of goods, and again ran away somewhere. It was as if there had never been any talk of changing jobs. "Are you crazy about the chief?" I asked. "Or is he just playing with you?" Once Nancy could not stand it, looking appraisingly at a bouquet of fiery marigolds in a golden wrapper. "No one falls in love with anyone," Claire said fervently, hugging the flowers to her. "Oliver Jonathan is just a wonderful and kind person. He gave me a job at the most difficult time for me and even promised to find something better in the future." "Better?" Nancy burst out laughing. "And you believed it? Look, are you really so naive, or are you just pretending? What other point of view? There are a few potential clients here: pharmacist, accountant, sales manager. Each potential client needs a special education, but what kind of education do you have?" School, Claire replied in confusion. Well then, you only have one perspective. Become a girl for an hour with our playboy. He really wants to do it. He won't miss a single skirt. But he'll get tired of you quickly. He's a very fickle man. And you'll either go back to the newspaper or go out on the street altogether. Do you understand? Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she rushed to her back room without even noticing that she had dropped the flowers. The next time you see Oliver Jonathan's car drive up to the pharmacy, Claire, without waiting, runs out into the street herself to talk without unnecessary ears. The pharmacy owner was inspired, taking this as an expression of sympathy, but Claire immediately went on the offensive. Oliver Jonathan, please tell me, is it true that I may have some other job here? Or did you just want to cheer me up? I'm not asking for anything right now, but I need to know what's possible and what's not. Work? Oliver Jonathan asked about work dismissively. He was clearly not in the mood to talk. You don't like your job? However, I can only hire a pharmacist as a pharmacist. But in your spare time, your life could really be completely different. He tried to put his arm around Claire's waist. Claire recoiled, and without saying a word, turned and ran back to the pharmacy. This time Nancy was telling the truth. Claire returned home from work in a bad mood. Suddenly, a faint but insistent squeak from the trash can caught her attention. Claire slowed her pace and, following some inner impulse, went over and peered into the tank. There was a cardboard box tied tightly with duct tape, making frantic noises. Here are the same Inhumans. The poor man was thrown to certain death. Anger and anger were instantly replaced by compassion as the girl began to tear the damp box, releasing the prisoner to freedom. The prisoner was a small kitten, about 2 months old, black as soot from the stove. He stood on shaky legs, peering at his rescuer as if trying to determine if his luck was over or continuing. Claire stroked the soft fur and realized that she could no longer part with this fluffy ink stain. Well, boxing? Since you were found in boxing, that's what we'll call you from now on. Boxing in English. Boxing. Claire laughed, remembering the lessons of a foreign language. I wonder if Prudence Ivankoa will let them in now. The elderly woman, of course, was somewhat surprised, but after listening to the story of saving the box, she shook her head and said, Herods, we should put them in the box ourselves. She went to cut the sausage. The boxer approved the treat, ate it immediately, drank some water, and fell asleep right in Claire's arms. For some reason, her heart became unusually light and calm, and Claire sank into a deep sleep of the righteous, tenderly embracing her new friend in her sleep. The situation had indeed stabilized somewhat. Oliver Jonathan stopped bringing bouquets and chocolates. Nancy and Natalie relaxed somewhat, reducing the degree of their rejection, and at home after work, Claire was always met by a black box waiting for the hostess on the lower branch of an old apple tree. However, the pharmacy business began to fail. Claire learned from young pharmacists that even the most profitable pharmacy in the world cannot cover the owner's inattention to business and addiction to racecourses. The furrow between Oliver Jonathan's eyebrows grew deeper and deeper, and one day, after chewing his lips, he threw over his shoulder on the way out of the pharmacy. Most likely, I will be forced to sell this store. So, while you have time, look for something suitable for yourself. The girls exchanged glances. Boisterous Natalie was the first to comment on the situation. Why should we worry? Caterers and cleaners are not places where new owners bring their employees. We will need to see more. Maybe the new owner will be better than this. Nancy and Claire silently agreed, and the days went on as usual, until on one of these ordinary days, a small old man in a battered jacket and cap with a cracked lacquer visor wandered into the pharmacy. He asked if Dibazole was available for sale, and when the answer was yes, he started rummaging in his pockets for money. The search was unsuccessful, and the old man looked up at the girls with confused eyes. Girls, dear, help out. I left my wallet at home. Please lend it to me. I will return it tomorrow. I have to go to the train station to meet my son, and my head is spinning. I'd like a pill. If you want, I'll leave a watch as collateral. A good watch. A commander's watch. I definitely need to go to the train station. I haven't seen my son for many years, and my nanny died. She didn't wait. Grandpa, we don't lend anything, and we don't need your watch. Natalie's voice was adamant. The old man turned to Natalie, but she defiantly went into the back room. Claire's heart sank even harder than it had a couple of months ago at the garbage cans. After asking Nancy to prescribe medicine for her, she handed the medicine to the old man and quickly followed Natalie to the back room, refusing to thank him. A few minutes later, Oliver appeared on the horizon, frowning like a thundercloud. What is this misunderstanding in my pharmacy? Who gave you the right to dispose of drugs? He snapped at Claire. They've already pawned it, she thought, but she said aloud, I put it all on my paycheck. My grandfather was very ill. But Oliver Jonathan did not want to listen to the arguments. After telling Claire that she was fired for sloppiness and abuse of authority, he sped off somewhere, muttering obscenities under his breath. Claire stood there, completely stunned by what had happened, and then slowly went to collect her things, not believing in her heart that this monstrous injustice had happened after all. Just as she was heading out with 2 bags of her simple belongings, the same elderly man and an imposing man in a beige suit appeared in the doorway. Look, son, here she is, my savior. If it wasn't for that girl, I wouldn't have gotten to your car. The old man handed Claire the crumpled bills with trembling hands. Don't mention it, Claire said, shaking her head. Give the money to the cashier. I'm not a pharmacy employee anymore. Who fired you? The old man's dapper son suddenly asked. Like who? Claire answered simply. Oliver Jonathan, our host, she replied. Well, let's say he's practically the former owner, the son objected. I paid him the first installment for the pharmacy, and tomorrow we'll make out the final payment and my ownership of the place. So since he fired you, today you can actually go home. Tomorrow I'll give you an extra day off, and the day after tomorrow I'll ask you can go work in my... The man pronounced the word with emphasis. Yes, yes, in my pharmacy. And please accept my sincere appreciation for your caring attitude towards my father. There was a long pause in the air. Claire looked at the man in surprise, not believing her ears. Nancy and Natalie glanced angrily at the old man, as if he was guilty of something, and pulled their heads into their shoulders. The old man was smiling like a child, and the son was very serious. Finally, Claire found the strength to nod, and her son smiled and stepped aside a little, and she ran out onto the porch, exposing her face to the midday sun. Hurry home. I'll have to tell Prudence Ivankova everything. And how glad Boxing would be that she'd arrived early. A day later, Claire discovered global changes in the pharmacy. Instead of Nancy and Natalie, 2 new girls came to work, Ina and Olivia. They were very different even in appearance. Ina was tall and strict, and Olivia was a plump giggler, but it was easy to find a common language with both of them. But the miracles didn't end there. Closer to lunch, the new owner of the pharmacy arrived, introduced himself as Gregory Valentine, and offered to go to the central office. Claire timidly walked through the office corridors and was completely lost in the office, not daring to sit down in a leather chair at a polished side table. Sit in the chair, what are you doing? Gregory Valentine encouraged her. I want to get to know you better. So far, all I know is that your name is Clary. You are a decent and selfless person, and you have suffered unfairly for helping my father. I will ask you to tell us about yourself. I intend to radically change the personnel policy in the pharmacy chain. Claire hesitated. She'd never had to tell a stranger about her life openly before. Prudence Ivankova doesn't count. She's almost her own now. Gregory Valentine was in no hurry. His eyes were alert and understanding. Claire sighed and began her sad story. Without noticing it, she began to talk and told the new boss about the debt for the shortage, about the burned-down house, and about Prudence Ivankova with boxing. At the end of the story, Gregory Valentine sat in thought for a while and then said, "Yes, everything you have told me is a vivid example of the fact that life's adversities often form a person with a healthy moral core. Claire, you and I will do this. I need someone who will track and analyze sales in pharmacies and give me reliable information. I could trust you as a decent person, but there is one condition. For such work, you need a special education." He continued, "You, as an orphan, can be arranged on a budget. But you will have to study in absentia, and this is a decent load. Both study and work will require almost all your strength. My lawyer will handle the debt. All these notes and threats are pure hoaxes. Without a properly documented shortage, this is just a ploy for an inexperienced girl. A receipt is not proof. You can always claim that you wrote it under duress. So are you willing to make every effort to radically change your life?" "Of course," Claire exclaimed incredulously. "I will try my best." "Well, that's all right," Gregory Valentine said with satisfaction. "Go to the HR department, arrange a transfer, and work here in the office tomorrow." It seemed to Claire that she was dreaming about all this. The white sheet on which she had written her application, the desk with the computer that she would have to work at tomorrow, and the office with a full-length window and colorful dracaenas in huge pots. But that wasn't the end of the day's surprises. On her way out of the office, she met the same elderly man she was buying medicine for at the time. "Ah, my dearest Claire," he spread his hands in greeting. "This is a meeting, so a meeting. By the way, we've never met. I'm Valentine Peterson." Claire laughed when she saw that instead of a worn jacket, he was wearing a new gray suit and a striped shirt. "Gina made me dress up," my grandfather said in embarrassment, and scolded me for not spending his money and living only on my pension. What about me? These are difficult times. I thought, who knows how he'll get on with this business? The edges are far away. What if it burns so badly that there won't even be enough money left to buy a ticket home? Then I'll send him his translations. Who knew he was a capitalist now? Not my Gina, but Mr. Smooth Talker. Well, never mind. Now you know everything. My son is back, everything will be fine. And we will have a more reliable host. And then, Ole, who is he? Chatterbox. Well, I taught him how to work with a file and chisel at school, but he didn't give in, so he stayed after school to finish the details. He's the one who's spreading his feathers now, but back then he was stuttering out of shyness. So I made him learn poetry and write it out loud to me while he tortured the dummy with a file. And you know, it helped. Since his hands weren't quite where they should have been, let's just say, he often stayed and fiddled with them for a long time. And he blurted it out. And the pharmacy made a mistake. He didn't recognize me. Then he will repent when he understands what is happening. And I've forgiven him, the bad guy. Maybe he'll come to his senses. And you're a good boy, a real one, and my Genka would have liked that. And then he runs into all the wax wings, all 30 years old, and no wife or children. I'll tell you what, my dear, come and see me often, and I'll find him a good wife. Do you promise? Of course, Oliver Jonathan. I will definitely visit you. Claire laughed in response, thinking about how generous and colorful the world around her could be.